everybody. It's about 8:37 this Wednesday morning, September 14th, 2011. You know, in any kind of media, since the dawn of motion pictures, the dawn of television, the dawn of the computer age and the internet, if you will, and mostly to the dawn of comic books and even radio, the one constant thing that's always been constant with a lot of people has been the leading lady when it comes to a program, when it comes to a series, a serial, when it comes to the television, or in most popular cases, comic books. We all know that since the beginning of comic books, the most popular comic book icon is Superman, and his leading lady was Lois Lane. And it didn't matter how many issues you bought for 5 to 10 cents back in the day. And it didn't matter how many times you went to the theaters and saw the Max Fleischer cartoons. All the time, most of the time, most of the scenarios would always involve Superman trying to help Lois Lane, or would have Lois Lane in peril, needing help from Superman. Now, when the Superman radio show came out in the 30s and 40s, the thing was, you had to tune in every week to see what was going to happen. The same with comic books. Just depending on how many times a month or a year comic books were published back in the 30s and 40s, you always had to wait until the next issue came out to find out what was going to happen. Now, as time went on and more superheroes and stuff were created in comic books and other kinds of media like film and television and radio, a lot of people the one constant thing that people liked about it wasn't just the main hero or the story arc that they were listening to or the serial arc they were listening to or whatever. It was the one compelling thing that always brought them back was the leading lady, because they always wanted to know what she would be getting into next. Where would the writer, the author, the narrator put the leading lady in next? What perils? What adventures? National Comics, if you will, DC's first name, I should say, the writers of the comics, of the Superman comics, would always find different scenarios to put Lois in. And they'd either have her be put, and again, it didn't matter if it was through the Max Fleischer cartoons that were made, or the serials you heard on the radio, or even the infamous 1950s show on television. The thing was, with the comic books, they always put Lois Lane in different situations. For example, there were some situations where one issue back in the 60s or whatever, Lois ended up being frozen, and Superman didn't even know that was her, frozen. In those situations, Superman had to save her from herself when she decided, hey, I'm going to get some superpowers by going invisible. And anytime you would look at the cover of that and read it, you always wonder, would she survive? And when they started doing issues almost like they were chapters, comic book issues like they were chapters, just as you would have listened to on the radio or watched in the theaters or watched on television, you always kept tuning in or listening or going to the theaters or waiting for that next issue because you wanted to know what happened to her. And that's an example of how long and how long the leading lady's been around, and how popular the scenarios that she gets herself in are to comic book fans of all ages. When X-Men came out, when Marvel Comics brought out the X-Men, and when Marvel Comics brought out Spider-Man, the leading ladies out of there, to begin with, on X-Men, up until this day have been Jean Grey. Until this day was Jean Grey. Was and is Jean Grey, I should say. Then on the other side of the spectrum, with Spider-Man, he had a variety of leading ladies. He had Betty Brant, Then he ended up having Gwen Stacy, who many fans took a liking to, but that was surpassed when they brought in Mary Jane. But here was the thing. When X-Men started to go in a direction with the Phoenix Saga that developed into the Dark Phoenix Saga, both scenarios had Jean Grey, who was very popular, I believe at the time, when those came out, with the fans. Then when they decided, you know what, we're going to have Jean Grey sacrifice herself, throw herself into the sun to save everybody. Oh, and then we're going to have her come back as a Dark Phoenix, and then we're going to kill her off. I'm sure that didn't sit well with a lot of fans. Same could be said with the whole Gwen Stacy deal. I'm sure Gwen Stacy got a huge fan base back when she was around. I'm sorry if I'm coming up all the time and checking my battery life on the camera, but I'm sure Gwen Stacy had a fan base when she was around, and I'm pretty sure that fan base was pissed off at the fact that she was killed off. She was killed. But according to what Stan Lee said, he obviously gave the okay to do it, even though he can't remember. And due to the fact that she's the only comic book character so far in any Marvel comic to stay dead. Even though they brought her back in different versions of Spider-Man throughout the years, from the new Spectacular Spider-Man to Ultimate Spider-Man to whenever. But that's just an example there. You see, even in the animated versions of these shows, you never knew what was going to happen to the leading lady. When I saw the animated version of the Dark Phoenix Saga, I thought they had actually gotten rid of Jean Grey. I thought that was it. But she was always in the intro, so that told me she was coming back. And when they did the Dark Phoenix Saga, that's when we knew she was going to be okay, even though at the end we thought, oh great, they're going to kill her off anyway. And then when they did the 90s version of Spider-Man, to substitute for the fact that Gwen Stacy was not in the prime universe that Spider-Man was in, they instead had Mary Jane fall off the George Washington Bridge, but not to her death. Not to her death, because that would have been too much for television, for a Saturday morning cartoon. Instead, they had her fall into sort of a voidless void, if you will, just waiting to be rescued, which apparently did happen, even though we never saw it. You get what I'm saying, folks? I mean, even DC, like I said, with Superman and even Batman have had it. I remember when Batman the Animated Series came out, there was an episode to where Selina Kyle, Catwoman, got captured by a guy, some kind of scientist, some kind of mutation scientist, and he turned her into a real-life panther-like cat or something like that, so she could be a mate for his other mutation. And even though we never, I don't know, and even though the episode ended with her still in that form, she obviously got changed back, even though we never saw it. You see what I'm saying, folks? Some people would look at let's say, for example, let's say that episode right there would be the one and only episode of Batman the Animated Series somebody would watch. And then that would be it. They'd probably be thinking to themselves, well, did she ever change back? I guess not. They wouldn't know until they saw another episode. You get what I'm saying? What I'm saying is that the leading lady of the comic book or any kind of franchise, anytime she's put in the peril that she's put into, or the situation she's put into, everybody wants to tune in to see exactly what happens. You can look at the previews and see what happens. I remember Disney, even Disney has done this many times. Disney has done this many times. I can recall, with shows like Rescue Rangers, shows like Tailspin, shows like Gargoyles, for goodness sakes. You never knew. You never knew exactly what was going to happen to the leading lady there. I remember watching The Hunter's Moon, which was the three-part finale, if you will, three-part series finale or season finale to the original Gargoyle series before the